When the midnight bell tolls, do you dare step through that long, sealed door of secrets? Imagine this. A forbidden book lies in the shadowy corner of an underground chamber, its cover etched with eerie runes, pulsing with an ancient, unsettling energy. Legend has it this book holds not only the truths erased by those in power, but also the key to humanity's spiritual awakening and the code of destiny itself. Tonight, we'll take you through the mist of time to uncover the forbidden knowledge that was deliberately hidden. Each page is like a beam of light, illuminating the deepest corners of your soul, pulling you into an electrifying journey of discovery. Are you ready to face the forgotten taboos and unlock the prophecy buried in the shadows of history? The moment has come. Let's unveil the secrets within and see what the past has been trying to tell us. In ancient times, forbidden books were seen as sacred and untouchable vessels of wisdom. More than just records of knowledge, they were rituals leading to spiritual awakening. Priests in ancient Egypt carved hieroglyphs and mysterious symbols deep within grand pyramids, inscribing knowledge of the afterlife, cosmic laws, and the secrets of existence onto stone and parchment. These forbidden texts not only guided souls to the next world, but also revealed an unspeakable connection between humanity and the unknown. Meanwhile, in the temple of ancient Greece, philosophers left behind cryptic writings filled with discussions on fate, existence, and truth. Legendary oracles like the Delphic prophecy often carried forbidden wisdom, using poetic and elusive language to foreshadow great changes and warn against the deception of appearances. Eastern sages, through simple yet profound words, painted visions of an illusory world and the path to inner awakening. Texts like the Diamond Sutra and Tor teaching offer rare insights into the essence of existence, was hinting that true power comes from a deep understanding of nature's laws. During the Middle Ages, alchemists and mystics regarded forbidden books as keys to unlocking the mind's deepest secrets, passing down knowledge in secret societies on how to decipher cosmic energy and inner transformation through runes, sacred geometry, and celestial alignments, because this wisdom threatened the foundations of power. Rulers and religious authorities often took extreme measures to seal away or destroy these works, ensuring that only a few enlightened individuals could access them. This forbidden knowledge was never just about words. It was a timeless spiritual experience. And now, modern science, through quantum mechanics, energy fields, and consciousness studies, is beginning to confirm what the ancients believed, that the universe and the self are deeply interconnected. The symbols and prophecies in these lost texts are no longer just myths. They unveil the possibility of energy transformation and self-awakening. As if whispered that fate is never set in stone, it is shaped by our own choices, constantly shifting and evolving. So today, as we revisit these erased and hidden texts, we are not just searching for lost knowledge. We are asking an eternal question. Could true freedom and awakening be hidden within these forbidden words? This ancient wisdom reminds us that only by confronting the deepest fears and desires within ourselves can we unlock the door to the secrets of the future. Imagine walking through a dimly lit library, surrounded by towering shelves filled with ancient scrolls and yellowed pages, each one radiating an air of mystery. You pull open a forbidden tome, its pages covered in dense runes and cryptic totems, whispering secrets of the universe's hidden truths. The ancient seers once said these forbidden books were more than just historical records. They were keys to inner awakening, revealing the deep resonance between humanity and the cosmos. In these pages, you'll uncover a core idea: knowledge isn't fixed, but a fluid, ever-transforming energy. Just as alchemists sought to turn inner lead into gold, the wisdom within these forbidden texts holds a secret ritual of purification and transformation. Every cryptic passage is a key, unlocking the doors of perception and leading you beyond the limits of conventional thought into a realm of endless possibility. The symbols and signs within these books aren't just remnants of ancient civilizations. They are echoes of mysteries modern science has yet to fully grasp. You might be surprised to find that these seemingly mystical patterns and prophecies align eerily with today's theories on quantum physics and energy fields. While silently revealing a fundamental truth, real knowledge is a dynamic balance, harmonizing the spiritual and the material, the internal and the external. But why, even now, are these teachings still considered forbidden? Because they challenge authority, disrupt the accepted narrative, and redefine reality itself. As you slowly decode these ancient texts, you'll feel a powerful inner shift, an overwhelming mix of fear and exhilaration, like standing on the edge of an unknown future. Torn between the dread of falling and the irresistible pull of discovering the light beyond. These books do more than record history. They call upon you to question, to break free, and to uncover the hidden truths buried deep within yourself. As we dive deeper into these forbidden books, we realize they are far more than mere records of text. They are treasure troves of layered symbolism. Every cryptic symbol, every veiled parable seems to hint at a hidden path to inner transformation and awakening. Picture the ancient sages reading parchment under the moonlight, their eyes filled with both sorrow and unwavering resolve, the kind of rebirth that only comes from enduring an inner trial by fire. These books don't just reveal the laws of the external world, they offer profound insights into how the soul struggles through darkness, only to emerge into the light. Within these texts, we often find a paradox. On one hand, they speak of absolute, unshackable truth. On the other, they suggest that truth itself is fluid, ever-changing, much like the endless waves of thought and emotion within us. This duality has left scholars divided for generations. Some believe these books reveal an inevitable fate, while others see them as a call to free will. Alchemists compared this inner transformation to the great work, where relentless self-reflection and spiritual trials turn the dull lead of the soul into radiant gold. Modern scientific theories, such as quantum entanglement and energy field dynamics, seem to support this idea. Nothing exists in isolation, and everything is in a constant state of connection and influence. This aligns with the ancient concept found in these forbidden texts, the unity of all things. It's this understanding of universal interconnectivity that reveals the true nature of forbidden knowledge, not as something sinister, but as a key to a higher state of awareness. On this journey, you may find yourself in a painful yet beautiful dialogue with your own mind, as if walking a thorn-covered path through the depths of your soul. Only by facing and surpassing your limitations can you truly grasp the boundless wisdom and power hidden within these books. Every tiny symbol serves as a reminder. Truth never reveals itself easily. It waits, concealed within every struggle, every awakening, ready for those brave enough to seek it. So, how can we apply the deep wisdom hidden in these forbidden books to real life and achieve inner transformation and awakening? The answer lies in a combination of practice and self-reflection. First, was consider keeping a wisdom journal where you record any insights or dreams that surface during quiet moments before sleep. Just like the ancient sages who carefully compiled their forbidden texts. This habit not only helps you track subtle shifts in your awareness, but also allows you to gradually decode the profound truths buried in your subconscious. Next, make meditation and stillness a regular practice by creating a distraction-free space for yourself. Light a candle, close your eyes, and clear your mind. In this state, you might suddenly grasp the meaning of an ancient symbol or a cryptic prophecy, triggering a deep inner dialogue. Through this practice, you learn to listen to your truest inner voice and turn the mystical wisdom of these books into practical guidance for everyday decisions. Additionally, learning to interpret ancient symbols and esoteric languages is a crucial step. You can explore books on mysticism, join study groups, or attend workshops to discuss forgotten knowledge with like-minded individuals. These interactions not only broaden your perspective, but also deepen your understanding of the hidden meanings within these forbidden texts. Finally, when applying this wisdom to daily life, critical thinking and self-awareness are essential. Rather than blindly worshipping any forbidden book, see it as a key that unlocks your inner potential. Whenever you face a life decision or feel lost, revisit your journal treatises and meditative insights to uncover the hidden path forward. Through continuous reflection and practice, you'll come to realize that true power doesn't come from external doctrines. It comes from the courage and wisdom to relentlessly pursue truth from within. The wisdom of forbidden books isn't just a secret locked away by those in power. It's an inner calling that transcends time and space. With cryptic texts and hidden symbols, they guide us to confront our deepest fears and desires, awakening the transformative power buried within our souls. As we've explored today, what every page of these ancient writings carries the profound reflections of past sages on life, the universe, and self-discovery. They remind us that true knowledge is never simply given. It waits to be unlocked by those bold enough to seek it and brave enough to look within. As you read these forgotten words, you'll realize they don't just challenge your understanding of history and reality. They ignite a fire of awakening within you. Forbidden books teach us that fate isn't set in stone. It's shaped by every courageous choice we make. Now, these ancient truths are resurfacing in a new light, calling you to step beyond the threshold and walk the hidden path toward freedom and inner illumination. So, let me ask you, could there be a forbidden book waiting for you to uncover its deepest secrets? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments, and let's explore the hidden truths together. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to bring more seekers into this journey of rediscovering ancient wisdom.